Hey fellow tarnished! Welcome back to this series where we essentially make builds with a focus on them looking great or having a unique playstyle over just being able to completely break the game. This is the second video in this series. I highly recommend watching the first one, link in the description below. Today we'll be taking a look at 3 more builds like that, so let's get into it. For our first build today we have a kicking Valkyrie build, partially or fully inspired by the Valkyries in God of War. The point of this build is to jump kick everything to death. That's it really. For the look we have the Divine Bird Warrior Greaves, which boosts our kicking attacks by 4%. Now this is where I got the idea for this build actually. At first I thought 4% would never be worth not having pants. But then I thought, why not try to make this work? I think I did an okay job. For the chest piece, we have the Gravebird's Blackwell armor, which is one of the best looking armor pieces in the entire game. It gives us the School Black Wings, and it boosts our jump attack damage. And to complete the look, we have Melena's helmet and the Guardian braces. Our main weapon of choice is of course Dane's footwork. Most of our attacks with it are kicks, which synergize well with our armor and talisman choices. But what you really want to go for is jump heavy attacks. To really take advantage of this build, this is a Faith build by the way. And so we are infusing our weapon with either Holy or Flame Art. For talismans, we have the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, which boosts successive attacks, the Shattered Stone Talisman, which boosts our kicking attacks, the Claw Talisman, which boosts jumping attacks, and the Viridian Amber Medallion +3, which boosts our stamina, because this is a very stamina-hungry build. Dry Leaf Whirlwind is our Ash 4 of choice. It doesn't synergize with the jump attack boosting items, but it is a bunch of kicks, so it gets boosted by the other items that we have, and it activates the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia. Onto why this is a Faith build. Besides us getting access to a myriad of spells, we actually get more AR than we would have if we went for Dex or Strength build, and we're much more versatile with the types of damage that we're dealing, since we can infuse with either Flame Art or Holy, depending on the situation, and our weapon art is fully dependent on AR instead of scaling with a specific stat, so there are no drawbacks to doing this. The best seal to use for this build is the R3 seal, since we do have 70 faith. And for spells, you can really use just whatever you want. I recommend using the Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for more damage and defense. For offensive spells, Divine Bird Feathers come to mind as something that would complement the look of this build, but sadly it sucks, so don't touch it. You may have noticed that I have a weapon on my back, and this is a Holy Infused My Lady. It's a weapon with a very elegant moveset that really fits a Valkyrie. But I'm mostly using it for the looks, since it does look great on our character. We're not really building around it, but you can always just use the Deflecting Heart here and instantly make it a good weapon to use. But the real reason we're using it is to use the aspect of the Crucible wings to really complete the Valkyrie look. We get to have 4 wings when we use it. We look really cool in my opinion. The skull itself is fine. It's a good option for closing in the distance to enemies. It's fun too. For physic tiers, we're using either the Holy Shrouding Crack tier or the Flame Shrouding Crack tier, depending on what infusion we're using, and the Thorny Crack tier for more damage with consecutive attacks. Overall, this is a very powerful build. The kicking jump attacks are some of the most fun and powerful in the game to begin with, but we're using so many things to buff that specific attack, so this is really good. Much of the footage that you're seeing for this specific build is from before 1.14, and FromSoft buffed this weapon in 1.14, so you'll get even better performance. And this is the full character sheet for this build. You know how some bosses in Elden Ring have that thing where an attack takes super long to do, or how some combos have delayed attack in the middle of them? Well, this build is about attacking these bosses during these delays. The idea for this build came to me when I wanted to take advantage of the retaliatory Cross Tree Talisman, which buffs rolling and backstab attacks, and I immediately thought of using dual daggers paired with a fine Crucible Feather Talisman. The daggers cover a very large distance with their backstab attacks, and deals piercing damage, which gives you a large damage bonus if you attack an enemy during their attack animation. And I used the Spear Talisman for more damage for attacks like this, and I would use the Fine Crucible Feather Talisman, which gives us iframes on our backsteps, so we can use that attack more safely. But it turns out that you can do the same attack using the Quickstep Ash 4, and the Retaliatory Talisman would still buff it. So we're using Quickstep instead, because it's much easier to use and is much more reliable. Quickstep is much better for this build than Bloodhound Step, because the smaller distance of the dodge actually lets us close the distance and retaliate faster. The Quickstep is also much more circular in its motion compared to the Bloodhound Step, which is more of a straight line. You can use Quickstep to circle around your enemies and attack them from a vulnerable spot, and you're more likely to get piercing damage bonus that way. The backstab attack hits twice, and we try to use it as often as we can, so we're using talismans that buff consecutive attacks like Millicent Prosthesis and the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia, We're also using the Thorny Cracktear for more damage with consecutive attacks. The daggers I use are the Earth Steel daggers. They're straight up the best daggers for melee damage in the entire game. They get good faith scaling even with physical damage, so we get good physical damage in addition to our chosen affinity, despite not investing much in any other stat besides faith. Like the previous build, we switch between Holy and Fire affinities, depending on the encounter. And we also switch between Holy Shrouding Cracktear and the Fire Shrouding Cracktear. They also get this heavy attack where you slash twice. It deals some very decent damage. It's also very fast. This is shorter than your normal light attack combo, so it will be your bread and butter outside counterattacks. We have 65 faith for this build, and for that level, the best seal to use is the Godslayer seal. For what spells to use, you'll be using the Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for defense and damage, and whatever else spells that you like. For the looks, this is what I went for. This outfit lets us light roll, and Leda's armor gives us 10% damage buff to rolling and running attacks, so it's a decent buff to our build. This is definitely the hardest build to play so far. You need to learn the boss patterns really well to be good with it, but it's worth it in my opinion because of just how fun this playstyle is. And this is the full character sheet for this build. For our final build today, we have the Grave Warden build. This is not actually a Grave Warden, but I just call him that because his look is inspired by the Grave Warden from Elden Ring and the Grave Warden from Dark Souls 2. The point of this build is to use the Poisoned Hand, which has this weapon art that poisons most enemies and some bosses almost instantly. The Poisoned Hand also gives us a good damage buff when we poison an enemy, even if we're two-handing another weapon. The Poisoned Hand is literally flayed skin that you wear, and so I try to make the character's skin color match the skin from the weapon. Here are the color settings for that. I think I got very close. This is the outfit we are wearing. And you guessed it, this lets us light roll. After we poison an enemy with the Poisoned Hand, we immediately switch to our real main weapon, which is the Occult-infused Venomous Fang. We're using the Occult affinity because it makes our physical damage scale with Arcane, and the difference in poison buildup between the Occult affinity and the Poison affinity on this weapon is negligible at best. The Poisoned Hand also scales with Arcane, so we're getting physical damage, stats buildup, and good damage on our secondary weapon, all by investing in one stat, which is just amazing. Our Ash of War of choice is the Poisoned Flower Blooms Twice, which deals massive damage to poisoned enemies and actually removes the poison effect, making them susceptible to being poisoned again. So again, the idea is to poison an enemy with the Poisoned Hand, getting a huge damage buff from it and the Kindred of Wrath's Exaltation, switch to the Venomous Fang, nuke the living hell out of our enemy, then just continue the cycle over and over again. The Venomous Fangs need no introduction. They're one of the best weapons in the game by far. They're super fast, they hit like a truck, they have obscenely high stats effect buildup, and they even inflict deadly poison instead of regular poison. Just a great weapon all around. For talismans to use, obviously we have the Kindred of Wrath's Exaltation, which buffs our damage when we poison an enemy. We mentioned that earlier. The Rotten Winged Sword Insignia and Millicent Burst Thesis to buff consecutive attacks, and the Shard of Alexander to boost our weapon art damage. This already is a very powerful build because of just how many damage buffs we're getting by just fighting our enemies. But it gets even more insane. Since this is an arcane build, we get very high scaling with the Dragon Communion Seal. We use it to buff ourselves with Flame Grant Me Strength and Golden Vow to get more damage and defense. But we also get very high damage with any other incantations that we want to use, especially the dragon spells. And this is the character sheet for this build. Hey guys! I hope you liked this video. If you did, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, or watching last week's video. To be honest with you, last week's video didn't do all that well, so please, if you do like this style of video, consider doing all the YouTube crap and giving me any feedback that you have. There will be at least one more video like this, even if this one doesn't do all that well either. And bye-bye!